Hey guys, good morning. Okay, this is what I left off yesterday. What I think I'm gonna do is organize this a bit. Okay, see, this is one of the problems with the much wider screen that I have compared to what other games of the genre does. A little reference here. Because everything's more compact on the screen, which has its disadvantages. Obviously, you can see the proportions of how much text is using up the screen. So just with the player names and the health values here, you've practically used up everything. And I want the combat mechanics to be more complicated in my game than they have been in the past, and so to explain what's going on with everything, it's going to use up a lot more screen room. But you can see one of the downsides is that trying to recreate that scene here, I'm left with a huge amount of dead space. So I think what I'm going to need to do is I'll bring these guys forward a bit, which leaves me basically one more slot for enemies. I'm trying to, with the enemies at the moment, I'm trying to make them slot in like they did in the old days kind of thing. You can see that they're very uniform in the way that they're laid out, and they have a very set amount of like grid squares that they use up. So this guy's like a 2x2, you can see that. Yeah, so it's leaving us a lot of room back here, which is good. There's potential for me to use this space like for status ailments and stuff, because I'm going to need room to have that information. Another thing I can do is have the enemies come forward and have enemy information here as well, because there's certain things I want to show, but I'm not sure yet. I didn't really think very hard about what I was going to do before I started recording, but that's alright. 73, let's make it an even 72. And then 72 on this side is there. No, why is my cursor gone ugly again? I hate when Photoshop does this. No. Something like that, which gives me room for 8 enemy squares, which might be slightly less than I wanted. And it does let me put information here, which I have some ideas of what I'm going to do. Yeah, they're pretty darn cramped. Maybe even's not the way to look at it. Let's say I take 16 off. No, stop. Do what I want you to do. Thank you. And then thank you. Grids off. Alright, that's kind of our maximum right there. 15 slots. I just don't know if this will be enough space. I guess I gotta do slightly more UI stuff. I was kind of intending on starting to implement this, but oh, guess what, that's what we're doing today. Let's do it. Okay, I'm just doing a bit of UI work here to finish this up. One of the innovations I'd like to have for this game is more detailed information about what you're fighting exactly, particularly when it comes to things like weaknesses and just overall being able to prepare a battle strategy rather than encountering a new enemy and having to basically guess like what their immunities are and stuff like that. What I'm trying to do here is that on the enemy that you're targeting, it kind of brings up this little information label in the top left, which gives you a bit of information. A little picture of them, because that's quite easy to grab from the battle sprite on the fly. And then the information comes from these two sets of icons I've got here. Obviously work in progress, but this is kind of what I'm feeling. These ones under the name, these small white ones, are much more general, applying to every enemy that you encounter. The idea is that they give a basic understanding of the kind of attributes that the enemy has. So for instance, based on this information, 1 heart and 2 sword icons, it indicates that it's a strong physical attacker. Probably could have guessed that from the big ass sword that he's wielding, but this is some more clarity up here. And the 1 heart there, maybe that's how much health you can expect it to have. I don't want to explicitly give the amount of health that an enemy has. I think there's a good reason to keep that secret, and it's because your ability to track the progress of a fight and use your own judgment as to when you're able to go all out to finish an enemy and give up your defenses in that way. I think there's some mind gamey stuff there that's great, and I want to preserve that. So I don't want to have full clarity on everything that's told. You know, I don't want enemies to have the same panels as our heroes have here. Rather, I want you to kind of consider the hints that you're given in this panel and to plan your fight accordingly. I've got some other icons here. They're quite bad, but you know, if you see an enemy with like some shield icons and it's probably armored, probably more resistant to physical attacks, this circle, which is meant to be like a magic seal, would denote that they're probably more resistant to spells. And yeah, maybe this fireball says that it suggests that this enemy deploys magical attacks. And so based on that information, you still don't exactly know his fighting patterns, but you can kind of guess, you know, do I need to buff up my party's magical resistance or physical resistance and stuff like that. Then the next set of information is less general in these slightly larger, slightly different icons under here. These two icons denote that, first of all, it's a fish, it's an aquatic enemy, that's what it's saying, it's part of that family, and this weapon icon indicates that it is a enemy that's wielding a weapon. That one's probably easier to tell because he's actually got a sword, but the significance here is that these are much more specific. Like there'd be aquatic enemies, and then there'd be enemies a part of a flying family. These are limp guys, they're probably also wielding weapons, but they're probably a part of like the demon family or something like that. And that's how you'll be able to figure out, without guesswork or without googling, what weaknesses and resistance enemies have. You don't need to understand every enemy on an individual basis for this information. You can kind of look at these things and deduce, well, if it's a fish enemy, then maybe aquatic enemies are generally weaker to lightning based attacks, and if he's wielding a weapon, then certain techniques that disarm enemies might be effective and worth trying. So that's my idea anyway. The way I imagined it was I was going to list more down the side here. It doesn't exactly kill the dead space here, but maybe, I mean, it'll kind of dip into it, right? If I list more families, I can kind of go vertically here, so maybe it is useful to have this space, but because if I kept going horizontally like it would, if I get my grid squares up, I'm trying to keep the grid squares clean, right? So I've got room for one more there, and then I've got to go next one, which I think is alright. It's just that towards the bottom here, the space that'll never be used up. So before I start implementing this, I'll probably take this chance to actually redo these generic windows I've been using, which are literally the Dragon Warrior 2 ones, just because they came from my reference images. Peace. Alright bros, the UI is officially mine now. I've reduced the thickness of the borders from 2 lines to 1 line. And now it's a completely new game, and more importantly, it's my game. So this is no longer a Dragon Quest ripoff. This is an original RPG by me. So, right, I've been tinkering around with this quite a bit. Instead of the floating panel, I thought I could put the stuff down there to kind of cover up where it's going to list the enemy names that you're fighting, because that information isn't very useful beyond like a glance at the start of the fight really. I've got room under the traits to denote positive or negative effects on the enemies. That's probably the same information I'm going to have in this blank area between the players and their little UIs, because I wanted to keep it very divided. Like I want this wall at the top to be like uninterrupted, then I've got the battlefield, it's nice, and then like all the active UI stuff that you'll be using is down here. You can see I've got slots for like 8 commands per player, which I think will be fine. Yeah, I think I've tinkered around with it much. I don't want to get too perfectionist with it, because once I start putting it in and then I start playing around with it, I'll start to notice like its flaws, and then much later on in the game I'll start to think of like neat ideas I'd like to have, and then I'd have to change the UI to accompany them. But I think this looks good, so I think the next task I'll be doing is trying to put this in game purely from a visual point of view. Like we'll just line everything up, then we'll play out the battles exactly the same as they were last time we visited the project, which was, they did the little horrible head bumps into each other until they gradually got whittled down and disappeared. We'll just whack that in and do that, and then after that we'll probably start looking into getting the commands and stuff to work so we can actually attack and choose an enemy to attack and update the UI accordingly. Great. I'll catch you guys on the flip.